Welcome to the third edition of Talking Diabetes with Pitso Molemane. I am Pitso. Our guest today is the award-winning legal journalist for News 24. She has covered major legal events in the country, including the Oscar Pistorius murder trial. In 2022, former President of the Republic of South Africa, Jacob Gedleyihlekisa Zuma, tried to jail her for 15 years. 15 years for covering court proceedings. However, multiple courts have not agreed to that. They threw his case and declared that this is going to be unfair to stop her doing her job. Please welcome me in welcoming Karyn Maughan. Karyn, welcome to Fighting Diabetes with Pitso Molemane.
I'm really so looking forward to this conversation, and I think it's really great that you're doing this. So important.
Thank you so much. Karyn and I share a lot of things, not just the conversation today that we are having. We both a journalist. We have lived with diabetes for 43 years, type 1 diabetes for 43 years, and we are both over 40 years old.
Yes. No, exactly. I don't know anyone. When you said we both had it for 43 years, I was like, that's a God thing. He's clearly like making us meet, that I feel like I've got a friend who understands what it's been like, you know?
Indeed. So it's sort of a literal mirror image, a sit-down conversation today between me and you, Karyn. Yes. Karyn, without wasting time, you were diagnosed when you were 4.5 years old, you know?
Yeah.
Take us through your childhood. How did you accept diabetes? How did you, live with diabetes, especially when you were still a child?
So when I was diagnosed, it was back in the day, and there wasn't a lot of the great tech and everything that's available now. So I had lost a lot of weight, and my mom thought it was because my dad was taking these business trips to Germany, and she thought maybe I was missing him. But I would just drink, constantly, which is one of the symptoms with type 1 diabetes.
Yes.
And, I was losing weight. I was always tired. I wasn't feeling great. And one of her friends said to her, listen, I think you need to take her to a doctor. She might have diabetes. My mom didn't really know what diabetes was at that stage. And she took me to the doctor. My blood was tested. But, it took a bit of a while for the results to come back. And my blood sugar was at 36. So a normal level for the average person will be about 5.
Yeah.
That's where if you don't have diabetes, that's where your blood sugar should be. And so obviously it was quite an emergency, and they had to take me into hospital. And then, you had a 4.5-year-old child who has to deal with the reality of, injections 3 times a day, multiple snacks to make sure that your blood sugar was stable. So it was quite a radical thing. And I think my mom, my parents were amazing, but particularly my mom was incredible in making it not scary for me, because my mom said that she initially was so frightened of injecting me because, she's inflicting pain on her child. And she just prayed about it, and God just gave her this incredible peace. And because my mother was like, oh, just going to give you a quick injection, she made it into a thing that I didn't have to be afraid of. And, I'm so grateful to her for that, because I think my early part of my experience in diabetes was not as traumatic as I think it is for a lot of young people who are now thrust into this situation where they're having to have these injections. They have this risk of loss of life, either through very high blood sugar or low blood sugar. My mother was instrumental in really managing my diabetes when I was young very, very, very well.
Indeed. Karyn, we're now seeing in the country many children developing diabetes. What advice, me and you, we've lived with it from childhood. What advice can you give the parents who are struggling? There's a mother there who yesterday or even today has been told that, your child has diabetes.
I really understand that it can be quite terrifying, because you are living with a condition, we know it, you and I know it, that can take your life if your blood sugar goes too low or too high. And, the feeling of going into a very bad low blood sugar event where where your blood sugar is dropping and oxygen is literally being starved from your brain. It's terrifying, and it can be incredibly terrifying for a parent, because you're literally walking around with that realization that the child, is at risk. But, the one thing I will say is just to go into that space of realizing that this is a really difficult condition and no one is expecting you to do this on your own. There are so many, and I think, and I would really urge the doctors in the state system as well, with the pediatric diabetics as well. There are some really, really good support structures available. And, it's just to ask for that help and not to carry this around with yourself. And I also think what you're doing in really addressing that unfortunate stigma that surrounds diabetes is so important, because the more we speak about this and the more we say, no one is expecting you to deal with this on your own. Here's what we can do. Here's how you can handle this. This is the support that can be offered. This is how you manage. This is the food that's good for your child. And the more we do that, the more people don't feel alone and terrified about managing the future of their child with diabetes.
Indeed. Thank you so much for that. Indeed, that's what the parents needs to do. Karyn, you are a seasoned journalist, trained to investigate and to report. For a professional like you, who uncovers other people's stories on daily basis, when you were, how do you process the news on daily basis that you are living with diabetes, and then also doing such a demanding, stressful job of being a journalist?
Well, I think, you realize the older you get that everyone in life is carrying their own burdens. And that's why you need to really just treat everyone with decency and compassion, because, people can have chronic medical conditions like anxiety or depression, or they can, have suffered the loss of a parent at a very young age. They can be walking around with the pain of betrayal. They can be walking around with a condition like a chronic condition like epilepsy. There are all these things that all of us are going to have to carry in our lives. And so I think the benefit of being a journalist and doing the work that I have is just to, a lot of our jobs is really walking into, the deep grief and pain and trauma of other people. And I think that it was a God-given thing, because I realized yes, I have this condition. Yes, it's a challenge, but I have a very good life. And I have the benefit of being a middle-class white woman who has access to excellent medical aid and can get the help and can get the support. And, I haven't had the kind of traumatic things that I've seen occur in the sphere of my job, where as a young journalist, a young court reporter, I had to sit with parents whose children had been raped and murdered. And I'm always very grateful for the fact that God put me in that position to sort of carry people through those experiences, but also just to have a realization of, we will all go through things in our lives, and we can either, have a defeatist attitude to them, or we can say, okay, this is the condition that I have. This is the help that I can get, and who are the communities, who the people can help me. And I think that was a very long path for me to walk, because I have gone through periods where I was really badly not managing my diabetes very well at all. A lot of people go through those periods, especially as when you're a young adult or you're a teenager. There's no judgment, there's no stigma in that. But it took a while for me to realize, okay, this is my situation. And if I can get the help, I can manage this well, and I can lead a really, really good life.
Indeed. And then the challenge is something very important that you mentioned there, Karyn. What challenges did you experience when you were not controlling or bringing the sugar level between the normal range, 5 and 7, 5 and 8?
So there's a phenomenon with adolescent diabetics, or young adult diabetics, that's called the wilderness years, where what I did when I was at Rhodes was I believed that if I exercised, I would not have to take insulin. So And that's an absolute disastrous thing to do. So I was exercising like 4 hours a day, doing all this aerobics. I weighed about 50 kilos, so, 13 kilos less than I weigh now. I was very, very thin. My hair was falling out. And it was just really God's grace that, my mom prayed for me throughout this period, but eventually got to see a doctor, and he was like, your blood sugar is out of control. You need to sort this out. And I think that was the beginning of a sort of path of getting back into a space of health. But, you and I both know that diabetes is a really complicated illness. You can do absolutely everything right. You can be eating everything that you should eat, and next thing you have a stressful experience or something happens and your blood sugar will shoot through the roof. It's not who you are. You are living with a condition that you have to manage. But if the condition sometimes goes a bit high or you go low, it's not a reflection of you as a person. And I think that was an instrumental thing, because I think sometimes we get locked in this idea that in order to feel like we're doing well, we have to be perfectly in control. And then we only want to go and see a doctor when we're perfectly in control so we can get validation. No, wherever you are with your diabetes journey, go and ask the doctor for help, because there's so much they can do to give you good advice about how to get your levels into a reasonable space that allows your life to be good. And allows you to have a happy existence, which I think is what we're all aiming for.
I love that, Make sure that, as Karyn is advising us to do, make sure that your doctor, any healthcare worker, your nurse becomes your friend. Make them your friend so that when you are struggling with diabetes, while at home, late hours, you can easily reach out to them. Karyn, how do you manage what I can refer to as the invisible labor, carb counting, glucose monitoring on daily basis, especially in the industry of journalism? Let's say, for example, you are on assignment or you are meeting strict deadlines.
So, I think it was a lot harder before we had the continuous glucose monitoring pods. So just to explain to listeners and viewers, in the last few years, there's been what's called continuous glucose monitoring devices. So I think, Pizzo, you also have one.
Yes.
But we have these little pods that are on our arms. And basically they connect to our phones. And you can keep monitoring your blood sugar, and there'll be a little arrow to say, are you stable? It's like, or you going up or you going down. Yes. So you have the ability to sort of keep track of what's going on with your blood sugar, which is instrumental to being able to say, okay, I need to eat something, or I need to maybe take a unit of insulin, or what do I do now? So that's been game changing. But before that, it was really difficult, because you would be on these big stories especially when I was working for ENCA, or I was working in independent newspapers in Cape Town. And, there'd be a breaking story and someone's just got convicted of murder, or there's been a major development in a trial. And suddenly you can just feel your blood sugar dropping, and you are caught between the demands of your profession and the biological reality that if you don't eat something, if you don't get help, you're literally going to go into alone and stop functioning. So it's the thing of always having sweets near you. I always carry Energade everywhere I go. Having, food, having lunch, being prepared for those kind of things. And also just having colleagues where you can say to them, look, all my colleagues know I'm a diabetic. Everybody knows I'm diabetic. I'm so open about it. So I can say to them, look, I've had instances where I've been on a crossing or I've been doing an interview and I suddenly radically go low.
Wow.
And, because I'm open about it, people can go, okay, no, we need to go off her. She's not okay. And so, that's part of the importance of saying to people, I have this condition, I'm living with it, but sometimes, I might have a few blips along the way, and let's deal with it in the right way at the right time, and I think that's really, really important.
Indeed. And then what is the biggest daily hurdle about living with diabetes? Especially also helping people who don't understand this disease, people, believing in the myth, surrounding or about this disease.
I think one of the issues is that people don't understand the difference between type 1 and type 2 diabetes. So, I mean, type 2 diabetes is the vast majority of diabetes in the country. I think it's about 90% of all diabetics are type 2s. And that's, a form of diabetes that comes oftentimes later in life. And it can be linked to, obesity or lifestyle issues. That being said, I think that we need to radically change the conversation around type 2, where it's not stigmatized as people, not eating properly or whatever, because as I was saying to you before this, obesity is very much linked to poverty, and it's very much linked to people not necessarily having access or the ability to buy the healthy foods, because healthy food is very, very expensive.
Absolutely.
And, oftentimes when people are working very long hours, sugar becomes a form of energy to them, and they might not realize that actually this is doing a bit of damage to me.
Absolutely.
But also type 1s, we're at 10%, and we often get diagnosed as children. You can get diagnosed as a type 1 later in life, but it's quite challenging because when you have low blood sugar and you have the risk of going into a diabetic coma, and that is where you can die or suffer significant brain damage and turn into a vegetable, that kind of terrible scenario. I mean, I know of instances, at least one instance where that has happened. And, it's if we start being open about having this condition and saying, I am a type 1 and, I can have these situations where I might be acting like I'm out of it or acting strangely and I can't respond to you. That's when people need to know, okay, this person is a type 1 diabetic. I need to get them some sugar. The reverse of that is, of course, the high blood sugar or diabetic ketoacidosis, where you run the risk of also, losing your life. And that's when your blood sugar is really, really high. But that's oftentimes in scenarios where people are not diagnosed and they don't even know that they're diabetic. And that's when they have to get that emergency care to make sure that their blood sugar can be brought down, in a way that doesn't endanger their lives slowly and get to a space where they're well again.
So true, so true. And our space, the media,
yes.
How can we improve, the stigma as well as the misunderstanding of the disease itself as diabetes?
Well, I think what you're doing right now is really important. Let's have an open conversation about this. Diabetes is a huge issue in South Africa.
Yeah.
And as I said to you before, it's got a lot to do with the fact that the majority of our people are living in poverty, below the poverty line. And so they are, they're eating very carbohydrate dense foods. They might not even have a fridge to keep vegetables or fruit in, quote unquote healthy food. They might not know that this, certain kinds of food are very carbohydrate dense and unhealthy. So those kind of things are very helpful to people in terms of understanding the condition. But with the type 1s, I think it's so much of an emergency just to differentiate those two types and to say to people, look, these are the dangers that come with both conditions. And, things like if you have a friend, for instance, and they smell very sweet or fruity to you, and they've lost a lot of weight and they seem out of it, the chances are that they might have diabetes. And to say to them, listen, let's go do a checkup. You can go to a Dis-Chem, you can go to a pharmacy. You don't even need to necessarily go to a state hospital. But what I would say to the government is let's make those tests free. Let's make those tests free. We learned, when COVID happened in South Africa, a lot of the people who were passing away were undiagnosed diabetics who were getting sick and their blood sugar was getting out of control. And unfortunately, that resulted in them going into diabetic ketoacidosis and passing away as a consequence of that, or reacting badly to steroids and going into DKA. So these are all things that can have real repercussions. And if people know that they're diabetic, it could really be altering in terms of the issues that the country faces in terms of its healthcare system.
Indeed, you mentioned something very important there, Karyn. With millions of undiagnosed cases in the country, on daily basis, there are people who wake up go to work, school, wherever they go, not being aware that, they are pre-diabetes.
Yes.
And then the latest data from State South Africa is telling us that, the disease itself is taking 78 people every day in the country.
No, it's tragic.
The question is, where's government?
Exactly.
Where are the medical, the pharmaceutical companies? Where are the medical aid companies? Why are we not having a national diabetes awareness?
It's so strange to me because if we were front-footed, we could save so many lives.
True.
And you know what? Oh, I get so emotional about this. But, like what pains me as well is like, I remember I go to the Center for Diabetes and Endocrinology in Houghton, which is excellent. There's so many good doctors there. But it's because I have access to private healthcare. And my doctor does a lot of work in the state healthcare system with pediatric diabetics, children who are living with this condition. And, he was saying to me, and I never forgot it, he was talking about how they had this camp for kids from the state system and the private healthcare system, obviously very different trajectories of life. And this child who came from Soweto, he was a teenager, was talking about the fact that when he goes low and he goes to his mom, she says, well, what am I supposed to do? There's no food in the house. Can you imagine as a diabetic? I mean, I'm just going to explain to your viewers, when we go low, they call it in the literature slipping away.
Yeah.
Where you just start feeling more and more weird. You sometimes lose the ability to speak. Your words are slurred. You might even look like you're under the influence.
Absolutely.
And as it gets worse and worse and worse, your ability to be able to help yourself becomes less and because I've gone into diabetic comas because of low blood sugar.
Yeah.
And I've had scenarios where I've literally known, oh my God, I'm dying. Like I'm going into a coma and I can't lift my arms. I can't lift my legs. There's nothing I can do. And by God's grace, my friends have saved me, or I've just felt God's presence in the room and he's helped me get what I need to get to survive it. But, it's the thought of a child in that situation, not being able to get food.
Sorry.
It's painful because we know how it feels to be in that situation. And you're so desperate just to have Coke or to have whatever you need to get your blood sugar up. Yeah. And a kid not being able to do that. I mean, this isn't something that we should not be addressing. I mean, when we talk about diabetic management, it's not just about giving the child the insulin. Does this child have enough food? Does this family have enough food?
Absolutely.
And let's my sister worked in Baragwanath Hospital. My sister also got diagnosed with type 1, but after she worked in the COVID ward at Groote Schuur and she got COVID, and then she was subsequently diagnosed with type 1 in her late 30s. Okay. But when she was working at Baragwanath prior to this, she had a young woman called Gugu who went into diabetic coma, and for whatever reason, the staff hadn't realized that she was going into a diabetic coma, and she died. And my sister spent a lot of time trying to resuscitate this young woman. And when she phoned me, she was in tears, and she was like, I just kept thinking it could have been you. And it can't be that because I have medical aid and I'm a white woman in a fortunate position, I get to live life and these kids are not. That's not, it's not a right thing. We can't as a country be okay with that. We can't be comfortable with the fact that your poverty will take your life before you get the chance to live it because you're a type 1 diabetic. I refuse to believe that, and I would urge the government to do better, because diabetes is a manageable condition, and there can be very small interventions that can be life-changing for people and can give them lives. So why are we not doing that?
Indeed. I mean, that's true, Karyn. I've also gone through so many challenges with regard to diabetes in my 43 years,
Sure.
And you put it correctly there to say that, food is important. In fact, food is one of the 3 weapons to fight diabetes, medicine, being physical active, as well as food. And Also very important is the support, be it family support
Absolutely.
or support from the public there, urging the public, not to, discriminate us, not to treat us bad as people living with diabetes. We need your support, understand our condition, but also familiarize yourself by knowing what diabetes is. Read a lot about diabetes so that if you realize that this person I'm with might have the symptoms of diabetes, then you know what you can do. But instead of, making fun out of that and then the myth and So education is very important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, it's just the more people who understand diabetes and how it manifests and the two types and, what the symptoms are, the more people can lead lives that are healthy and productive. Because the reality is that uncontrolled diabetes, as we saw with COVID, can claim lives. But you can also have scenarios where people lose their eyesight. Yeah. There's a thing called diabetic retinopathy that is very bad when your blood sugar is not controlled. And people can go blind. Yeah. People can go into kidney failure. They can have to be on dialysis for the rest of their lives. They can have their feet amputated. So it's not something that you can ignore. And government is now intervening at the time when it's too late, because there's this, the type 2 diabetics are not managing themselves properly. They're not managing themselves properly because they don't know how. And the whole system is geared up to only address the crisis. But we don't have to do that. We can say to people, okay, like exactly what you talked about, like what do we do about exercise? What do we do about food? What do we do like to enable people to say, okay, these are the things I need to be doing. I need to test my blood, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we could literally shift like the terrible disease burden that results when people are not well controlled. We can shift that into, let's spend the money on making sure people never get to the stage where their foot or their leg has to be amputated because they've been trying to avoid. They haven't wanted to say to the doctor, I'm not well, because they fear judgment and they fear being stigmatized.
Indeed, but also even the media.
Absolutely.
I personally challenge the media houses. Please, can we have articles, publications, media houses, publications? Can we please have articles about diabetes? Broadcasting media, can we please have radio shows and TV shows about diabetes? Let's educate our people, because it's sad. I mean, me and Karyn, we agreed that we're even feeling emotional to say that 78 people losing their lives on a daily basis. These lives can be saved.
Absolutely.
Diabetes can be averted. People can be helped to avoid diabetes. Sad.
Yeah, and it's just, I think the saddest thing for me is that idea of people not just losing their lives through low blood sugar or DKA, but losing their lives slowly because their bodies are failing them and there's no one helping them. Everyone, if we asked our audience how many of them know people who have lost limbs or have died as a consequence of diabetic complications, I guarantee you that there are going to be a lot of them.
Absolutely.
And, it also is extremely painful for the family members who have to watch their loved ones getting sicker and sicker and saying, oh, it's diabetes, but they don't really know like what they can do to help that person. True. And, and also the other reality is that when someone has uncontrolled diabetes, they can often, it can have a huge emotional toll on them because their body is in turmoil and they're literally being poisoned in many respects. And so oftentimes people can be very antagonistic and, angry and, moody and whatever. I mean, we've all been there. And people are just like, oh, well, I don't really know how to address that. But all of those interventions that can happen to say, okay, let's not stigmatize people.
True.
Let's say, you're clearly not well. How can we address this? How can we help you? Instead of saying, well, this is your fault. you're not controlling yourself without taking cognizance of how difficult that is to do on your own.
What do you wish the general public need to understand about diabetes?
I think it's, I hope they understand the difference between type 1 and type 2.
Look, maybe you can share if you understand that, and then I can help where I help.
Well, I mean, type 1 is really where, your pancreas just fails. And, type 2 is more of a sort of lifestyle orientated thing.
Perfect. Yes.
But, they both, they can both be very damaging. Type 1 tends to be more immediately life-threatening. So you and I were talking about how, that thing of growing up with this awareness that you can go to bed at night and not wake up.
Yeah.
I mean,
True.
I remember at the age of 12, I'd been in hospital with this guy. His name was Roscoe. And I was a little kid. I was like, I was 4 when I got diagnosed. And then I sort of had incidents of going into hospital because when you're type 1 and you get sick, you can end up in hospital quite a few times. Yeah. And that's what happened with me. But, I saw that in the diabetic newsletter, his mom was like advertising his test kit and everything, because that was back in the day when we had to prick our fingers and take blood. I think for the vast majority of people in the state system, they still have to do that. But his mom was like, she'd offered it to everyone and said, if anyone needs this. And I was like, why is Roscoe's mom giving away his test kit? And she was like, Roscoe's in heaven with Jesus. And like as a child, just realizing that this other little kid who also had the same thing as me was dead, I think was really hard. And, diabetes isn't just, it's not a thing where this person is has done this to themselves and now, they must just deal with the consequences. There are a lot of factors at play as to why people have this condition. Oftentimes, especially with the type 1s, it's often genetic. There can be many different factors, but let's walk away from that conversation about stigmatizing people, because I think that's what people do when they want to blame people for their condition, because that's easier to do than realizing that actually this can happen to me, this can happen to my loved one, this can happen to my family member. Rather than blaming people, let's just say this is a difficult condition, and like just every other human being that I encounter in my life, I want this person to have a good life. So how can I help them do that? And how can I help myself lead a life that takes me out of risk of either type 2 diabetes, or if I'm a type 1, allows me to manage the condition so I can have a full and happy life.
Indeed. And there's no cure for us.
No, I mean, maybe AI will come up with something. You never know. And people have had pancreas transplants and things like that. Yeah. But I mean, I'm, in a perverse way, I'm grateful that I have diabetes. I think like it makes me aware of how precious life is. And so I grow up my whole life just telling people I love them and I appreciate them, and trying to live my life in a way that if I don't wake up in the morning, everything I've said, or everything I've needed to say, I've said. And I think that that's one of the benefits of this condition, is that we know that life is short and life is precious. And you, as a type 1, you live your life with gratitude, because every day that you wake up, that's a day that God's given you, and you can go out there and just celebrate it.
Indeed, and we thank God for helping the researchers.
Absolutely.
Give us this diabetes technology that we are now using,
Amazing.
The CGMs, the small devices that me and you wear, and then I think a lot of guys. But we must also urgently appeal to the manufacturers of these devices. Please.
Bring the prices down. Yeah.
Expensive, right?
Very expensive. And again, it's that differential between, we are blessed to be in a position, a financial position, where we can have continuous glucose monitors on us at all times. But I mean, they are extremely expensive, and they're also dependent on us having phones, good phones, that that can monitor. And for the majority of people in our country, that's not something that they can afford at this present time. But if government is front-footed, as I said to you before, and they actually say, well, what can we do to bring these prices down? It could be life-changing for people. Certainly having a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor, has radically improved my control. And I've been able to avoid all kinds of hypos and high blood sugar episodes just through this. And I want that for everyone. I don't want anyone to be walking around having to prick their fingers, in order to know what their blood sugar is and not knowing what the trend is, if it's going up or down, or what they should do.
Indeed. Karyn, this brings us to the end of the show today. Thank you so much. And then me and you, let's continue to be the double survivor. And
Yes.
the 43 pair
43
of...
for life. We must like get our little tattoos,
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for doing this. I think it's so important. And, I just pray God uses it to reach people and just they don't have to feel alone. There's such a community out there, and there's so many people that want to help each other. And I really believe that this is going to help that happen. So God bless you for doing it.
Thank you so much. I receive. Right. This brings to the end of our show today. And let's meet again in the next episode, episode 4 of Talking Diabetes with Pitso Molemane. You can reach out to us on YouTube channel, Talking Diabetes with Pitso Molemane. See you next time.